it's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink. And listen. Welcome back, my dear friends, to the continuation of the story that I began last Friday evening. A phenomenal continuation to the Robert Cassidy universe. Now, in the first episode, we did chapters 1 to 9, so tonight we focus on chapters 6 through till 9. Oh, intrigue, mystery, murder, deceit. Everything is contained herein. So, buckle up, because it's going to be one hell of a journey. Time once again to enter the world of the Roadside Slayings. Chapter 6. Myself and Agent Rodriguez found a nice little diner on the edge of the city limits. He ordered a black coffee with a 4-egg omelette, filled with spinach and mushrooms, while I went for my signature toffee nut latte and a chicken salad. We ate in silence, both enjoying our first proper meal of the day. We finished almost simultaneously, before relaxing back against the leather to finish our drinks. Beats the crap they serve on the airlines, doesn't it? Rodriguez quipped, and I chuckled in agreement. Do you think I did okay in there? Truly, I asked, mainly fishing for compliments. Rodriguez took a swig of coffee and responded with, "Oh, you were terrible. I think those were pity applauds, and I think that Sergeant apologized to you just so we could get a better look at your wreck." His sarcastic banter made me laugh out loud for the first time in weeks. I playfully shook my head at his mischievousness. All seriousness, though, that was the best room I've addressed, and I mean universities and police. Honestly can't believe how committed and focused they were. So rare to have the whole room completely switched on, I said, still in awe. I took a swig of my beverage just as Rodriguez finished his. He seemed to hurry the gulp so he could respond. Well, that's because of Officer Knight. Apparently he was extremely well liked. The guy you have in every workplace who's never shy to pick up the tab. Will do anything for anyone. Buy you a beer when you're having issues with the wife. Yeah, he's that guy. Well, he was, he said, shaking his head in a somber manner. I must have gone quiet while I connected the dots and had a really disturbed look on my face. I was just recalling my talk with the sergeant when Agent Rodriguez stepped in. Oh, you didn't know, did you? Surprised given how much research he clearly did. Oh, no, not at the time. But the detective who came to apologize to me specifically mentioned the name Juliet when he was speaking of the victims. Didn't understand why at the time, but it makes total sense now. One of the victims was one of their own kin. No wonder they want this guy's blood. Oh, God, how awful. So, what happened to him then? Did he leave the force? I asked, taking another swig of my coffee. Rodriguez looked disturbed. He's dead, he informed me bluntly. My startled expression was a silent cue for Rodriguez to elaborate on the situation. I don't know whether it was planned, coincidence, fate, or just down horrible luck, but when the body was found and got called in, it was her father who picked up the call. Oh my God, no way! I was horrified. I'd seen the autopsy report. This son of a bitch had put this girl through copious amounts of hell. She could barely have been described as a human by the time she'd been discarded on the side of Highway 70, just outside of Lawrence. Can't imagine how it must have felt when he got out of the car and saw his daughter lying there, mangled and butchered, her vacant, milky eyes staring right through him, his world devastated beyond repair. Yeah, I spoke with some of the desk guys while you were in the bathroom. Apparently one morning, around a week after the murder, he just didn't come into work. Uniforms were sent to his home. They found him laying at the bottom of his stairs, noose around his neck and half of his brains on the corner of the step. I put my hand over my mouth and pinched my cheeks in a moment of deep sympathy. Wife died of cancer about a year back. Juliet was all he had. Poor bastard tried to hang himself, and the anchor point gave way under the weight. Smashed his skull against the stairwell on the way down. Oh, what an awful way to die, I commented, not really knowing what else to say. Oh, we survived the fall, actually. Was rushed to hospital and placed into a coma to try and help him. They thought it was a lost cause, but after a few weeks, there were signs of hope. His vitals were good. Everyone in the local police was praying for his recovery. Doctors did their best and tried to bring him round, but something was clearly wrong with his organs and they couldn't support him fully. He died after a serious cardiac arrest shortly after. Oh, it was a blow to everyone, so yeah, everyone in that station wants justice for the Knight family as well as the other victims. You know how cops are. You go after one of their own. Oh yeah, I do indeed. Well, I guess that explains why the presentation went so well. These people would have simply worshipped anyone who gave them even a sniff of a lead. Honestly, my newly regained front of confidence and swagger did slip for a moment. I felt disheartened and couldn't hide it even if I tried. Agent Rodriguez sensed this and quickly intervened. Oh, Ruth, don't think like that. Because, honestly speaking, you're phenomenal at this. You can really get into the mind of these types of criminals. Those police officers went from being blind and blinkered to being laser-focused and ultra-motivated. It's a rare talent to be able to connect with both psychopaths and non-psychopaths. In my experience, people only tend to do the one. Rodriguez spoke with such awe, I honestly think I blushed. He saved my front. Well, it's not always a gift. These people, the way they think, it's savage, diabolical, and just plain wrong. You know, it's funny, really. I initially got into this job because I wanted to help people change their behavior patterns before they committed these acts. I'd suffered 5 years with an abusive partner. What if someone had helped him work out his issues and became better? I wouldn't have had to go through everything that I have, but yet it's ended up here, where I'm using my skills to hunt these people down after they've raped and murdered someone. Of every sociopath that I helped put in jail, another 3 seem to be born somewhere else. Sometimes I wish I didn't live in this world. A world where evil will always be a factor in my day. Sometimes I wish I didn't live in this world. A world where evil will always be a factor in my day. Sometimes I wish I simply worked in a flower shop or diner like here. Somewhere that I wouldn't even be half as aware of the number of awful people that there are in this world. What is it they say? Ignorance is bliss. The agent couldn't help but nod in agreement with my view. I know the feeling, believe me. Ever since the night Robert Cassidy escaped, I haven't been the same, he confessed. I rearranged my seating position, letting him know I was here to listen to him now. After the Swarm trial, my career skyrocketed. Highest profile organized crime arrest in the FBI history, they called it. Shortly after, my mentor died, Bill Johnson. Best agent in the history of the Bureau, hands down. With the people we'd been chasing for years finally gone, and then Bill too, I was lost. I did cases, nothing big. A few bank jobs, a couple of drug gangs, but then the bodies started to drop all over the U.S. Flesh-eating, savage sexual violence, brutal murders. Robert Cassidy was the next big thing. When I was assigned to the case, I had purpose again. Chased him for 4 years almost. His sentencing elevated my career to a new height once again. It's funny how when you spoke about this unsub dumping the bodies for a thrill to satisfy his addiction, I can't help but identify with that. After Cassidy's escape, that night was the most I'd felt alive for a long time. The chase, the seeking, the hunt. God, I felt like me again. And then, Quince. The agent took a moment to hold back an outburst of unwanted emotion. I felt for him, and I admired his honesty. You know, they hung a fucking medal around my neck after that night. Gave me a goddamn promotion. All the while that son of a bitch was laughing his way to Canada. My friends were lying in a goddamn bag. Well, that unwanted emotion, it was there now. My lip began to tremble as I completely empathized with his pain over Quince. Do you know what? When I found out he was still alive, a part of me, a very small, sick part of me, well, yeah, I was relieved. Because with him alive, I have something to chase. He spoke his truth and waited for my judgment. Is that why you took this case on? Because you want something to chase? I probed. Full disclosure, I'm actually on kind of administrative leave from the FBI, he said, scoffing at the Bureau's decision. I almost spat my latte out. What? Why? I asked in shock. I was meant to be working with a task force, running a surveillance op on a human trafficking gang in Texas, but let's just say I was a little absent, in both a physical and emotional sense. I was too busy in my house trying to work out where Robert Cassidy could be. The deputy director was concerned with my behavior and even commented on my drinking at one point. He told me to take off a month or two. As far as everyone at the FBI was concerned, I'm taking a well-needed vacation. I'm actually supposed to be seeking professional help, but I think the best thing I can be doing is getting another psychotic monster off the streets. Jesus, James. I can't believe that you're only just mentioned this. Right. Just as I was beginning to go off on a tangent at the agent for keeping this from me, a noise cut me off. A cell phone ringing. It was Agent Rodriguez's. He quickly held his index finger up to stop me tearing him a new one in front of the diner and answered the phone. Supervisory Special Agent James Rodriguez. Whom may I say is speaking? Yeah? Holy shit. How is she? Try to find out what you can before they put her in the ambulance. Hear me? Anything. Name, places, vehicle, anything. We'll meet you at the hospital. Text me her ward and room info as soon as you know. You hear me? Okay. See you soon. Rodriguez was speaking fast and frantic. A man who truly had some huge news. He locked his phone and placed it back in the inside pocket of his Hugo Boss suit jacket. What is it? I asked, eager to be in the know. Another body was dumped just outside of Manhattan. Police were called and, get this, the caller said that the victim was still breathing. They're taking her to AVC now, he said, throwing enough money down to pay for our food and drinks bill plus a nice 30% tip for the waitress. What the hell are we waiting for? I asked confidently. James smiled at me and began to burst for the exit. I stopped him in his tracks with my fingertip pressing into his chest. But this conversation isn't over, I warned him. He softly nodded at me, acceptingly. I could tell he was reluctant, however. He pulled out his keys, to which I immediately snatched them from him. He looked at me confused. I'll drive, I instructed. Yes, ma'am, he said, shamefully. He didn't even bother asking why. Chapter 7. I did my best to keep up with a focused Agent Rodriguez in these heels as he stormed his way through the halls of AVC Hospital in the middle of Manhattan, Kansas, desperately looking for our star witness. A flustered receptionist managed to give some startled direction after the agent basically shook it out of her. I won't lie, I was concerned with his behavior and his mental state, now knowing what I did. But this wasn't the time to delve into that. We had a killer to catch, and this was our biggest breakthrough yet. We turned the corner, and as soon as Agent Rodriguez spotted the crowd of doctors in police uniforms, he made a beeline for the room. Has she said anything yet? Is she awake? I want to speak to her, he ranted impatiently. But between one of the officers and the two consulting doctors, they blocked his path and demanded he calm down. I'm sorry, Agent, but I can't let you see her. Bethany is in a very critical stage right now. The next 24 hours are crucial. If she makes it through that, then maybe there's a slim chance she'd be able to speak, but I wouldn't be recommending it, the doctor told Rodriguez firmly, and Rodriguez could not hide his frustration. Listen, pal, I've got a job to do here, so I need to... And so do I, the doctor snapped, cutting Rodriguez's balls off in front of everyone. Now please, Special Agent, a bit of professionalism here while we try to save this innocent girl's life, eh? He added, sarcastically. Rodriguez didn't have any verbal response, but he gave a slight nod and a facial gesture which I think was his version of an apology. I felt ashamed for him, to be honest, and that was before what happened next. A middle-aged couple, who'd clearly been crying a great deal, approached him as he stared at the floor to avoid eye contact with the crowd of law enforcement a few feet away. Hello, Agent. My name's Sandy Matthews. This is my husband, Jeff, she began. There was a definite edge to her tone, I noticed. Look, Mrs. Matthews, I'm truly sorry about... Rodriguez began to slur before the woman cut him off, mid-sentence with a firm slap to his right cheek. The sharp sound echoed throughout the hallway, causing everyone to look over. The agent's face was blood red from the embarrassment of the impact itself. Well, I honestly couldn't say. There's no hope for anyone, let alone my baby girl, if you're what the FBI sent to help catch this piece of shit. Grab a breath mint and go sober up, Supervisory Special Agent Rodriguez, she said in a very derogatory tone when she dropped his name. The woman couldn't even contain her emotion anymore and broke down. Her and the girl's father walked over to the window that allowed them a view of their baby girl, mangled, devastated, and full of tubes and wires. Agent Rodriguez was left to pick what was left of his pride up off of the floor as I went over to control the situation. Go find us a motel for the next few days. Go get some sleep and I'll clean things up here. We'll talk about what's going on with you when I get back, okay? I asked, but not really asking at the same time. He skulked off down the hallway, muttering under his breath that he would text me the info. I started to think about all the coffee I'd seen the agent drink today alone. No doubt he'd made those coffees very Irish. Well, I couldn't help chuckle. I empathized with him, based on our experiences with Robert Cassidy. But here this guy is, giving me a pep talk on the plane about my appearance, when all along he's hiding a drinking problem. Up until an hour ago, I wouldn't have known that man had any troubles at all. Well, I started by apologizing to the parents and seeing what they could tell me. Hey, I'm really sorry about my colleague. Trust me when I say today was the worst version of him you could have seen. He's one of the top agents at the FBI, and he's good at catching these kinds of people. I'm sure you've heard of the Swarm. Robert Cassidy? He helped put all of them in jail. A few months back, Cassidy murdered his best friend with a blowtorch after he escaped from Florence. He's still coming to terms with that, I explained to them gently. I didn't feel it was relevant to include my own internal suffering caused by that same event. Well, I'm sorry for his loss, but that's my baby girl in there. Look at her. Go on, look, she demanded. Her husband, who hadn't said a word during this whole exchange, moved to his right in order to give me a view of the inside of the room. I looked inside. Doctors say she has around a 15% chance of survival. And even if she does, she'll never be able to have children. She'll never even go to the fucking bathroom again. Skin grafts to her breasts, face, and back. Glass eye, brain damage. What sort of life does that sound like to you, Mrs. Maddock? I answered somberly. And no, it doesn't. I'm truly sorry for your daughter, Mrs. Matthews. And I can assure you that myself, the police, and Agent Rodriguez will catch this man, I added, making a stern promise to her. Just leave us alone, she demanded softly. I think she wanted to thank me for my assurance, but understandably just didn't have it in her. I headed over to the 3 police officers who were sipping their coffee a few feet away, no doubt waiting to see if the girl lived and talked, or someone showed up to finish the job before she did. Okay guys, can we forego all the awkward questions about my colleague's state of mind and get down to business? Who was first on the scene? I asked sternly. 2 of the officers turned and faced a young-looking officer who looked, quite frankly, like he'd seen a ghost. It was, I was, ma'am, the young officer managed to mumble out. Oh, the poor kid. I instantly felt a surge of sympathy for him. He'd clearly been traumatized. Hello, officer. Stevenson. Yeah, sorry, ma'am. Yeah, it's Stevenson. He could barely string a sentence together. His nerves were shot to pieces. I gave him a warm smile at his failed attempt at courtesy. Hi, Officer Stevenson. I'm the criminal psychologist consultant on the case. My name's Professor Maddock, but please call me Ruth. Is there somewhere more private we can have a chat? I asked in the gentlest tone I could muster. Yeah, cafeteria, lower floor, he informed me. Sounds perfect, I confirmed, smiling still. We made our way to the elevator and left the other 2 officers outside the victim's room as the cries and wails of the girl's parents suddenly rang out through the hallway. It wasn't good news. Chapter 8. I arrived at my government-paid motel in Agent Johnson's car around 7 p.m. that evening. He'd been good enough to sort my room next door to his. The desk clerk informed me that my colleague had my room key and just to give him a knock when I got here. I smiled and thanked him for passing on the message. I headed over to room 9 of the Gables Motel and knocked on the door. I heard the TV background noise as I waited for the agent to open the door. I found myself fixing my hair as I waited with the sound of the chain being removed from the slider. A sense of shame and guilt washed over me. Thankfully, I didn't have much time to dwell on it, as James opened the door. He looked like he'd been suffering from the same feelings, if I was being honest. Come in, please. His invite was a soft plead. I nodded and followed him in. The TV was showing a middle of a breaking news report. A female victim, whose identity is reported to be that of Bethany Matthews, a 23-year-old waitress from Manhattan, has sadly passed away from her injuries tonight at the Ascension Via Christian Hospital. While nothing is certain at this point, it's strongly believed that Ms. Matthews is now the 8th known victim of the serial killer known to the public as the Roadside Ripper, a violent and dangerous individual who has terrorized the highways of Kansas and Missouri for the past 6 months, abducting young women, subjecting them to grueling acts of torture and mutilation before dumping their bodies on the roadside without a care in the world. Ms. Matthews is so far the only victim who has been found alive. It is unknown if she was able to identify her attacker before she died, but CNN News will follow this story deep into the night. I'm Donald Stevenson, reporting live from outside AVC Hospital. Agent Rodriguez pressed the button on the remote and shut the TV off. As he sat on the edge of his bed, his head fell into his hands in defeat. Our star witness gone. I acted like a total asshole in front of her parents when she was alive, and now they have to grieve for her. Oh, good God. His voice trailed off into a whisper as he struggled to comprehend how bad this day had gotten for all those involved. I took a seat next to him, allowed my bag to slide from my shoulder to the floor, and I waited for him to turn and look at me. How long's the drinking been going on? I asked, straight to the point, but with a hint of empathy. When do you think? He asked, rhetorically. You know when you came into my office and spoke about this case, and how it helped that guilt I was feeling, that ultimately wasn't mine to bear, and you were basically a therapist in an FBI uniform? He nodded, shamefully. Well, that was all transference, wasn't it? You were trying to convince yourself of that stuff, weren't you? You think if you catch this guy, you'll stop those voices in your head that tell you that you killed Quince, don't you? I demanded to know. Tears began to pierce the lens of his eyes and stream down his face. He looked utterly and completely vulnerable. I see him, Every fucking night I see his face, burned. I can smell it, the torched flesh. I hear him screaming and begging for mercy. I'm haunted. That's the only word to describe it. I know the drinking's wrong, but it silences the voices. I polish between half and a bottle of bourbon off every night, and I sneak into my office throughout the day. Can't go on like this, though. Maybe if I help get this guy, then I'll be back to normal again, he confessed softly. Oh, James. I sighed softly, filled with sympathy. I came to you because you're brilliant at what you do, and I honestly didn't think I could do it on my own. He spoke with a raw honesty that a lot of people could have mistaken as self-pity. But I was looking into his eyes, and they told me he believed what he was telling me. You could have killed me, both of us. We've driven over 200 miles today, with you behind the wheel, tanked up on Irish coffee. This can't continue. If we're going to keep working together to catch this cycle, then you need to quit the booze. If you're hearing voices or whatever you want to call them, then talk to me, okay? Deal? I laid the ultimatum at Rodriguez's feet and waited his reaction. His delay to respond and the torn look on his face, like I was asking him to choose between his 2 children or something, told me that this wasn't casual drinking. This was turning into an addiction for him. Okay, he answered, heavy-hearted. I didn't judge. It's hard to face your feelings. James. I addressed him by first name to show I was being serious yet empathetic. I can tell you've already begun to gain a tolerance, and with no alcohol in your system, I understand that may affect you physically, so I'll help to wean you off of it. I'll drive us where we need to go. I'll make sure you have enough liquor to keep you even. I worked as an addiction counselor as part of my work experience in my sophomore year. I know what I'm doing. I once again waited for his reaction. He didn't say a word. He just broke down into my embrace for a few short moments. He soon pulled himself together and sat back up straight. Thank you, Ruth. You really are an incredible person. His tone, so genuine I couldn't help smile. And so are you, James. You're just battling some demons right now. We both are. You helped me fight mine, so I'm going to return the favor. I promised him, sincerely, and he nodded in approval. There was a silence as we shared a moment of mutual positivity. I do have a little bit of good news, I enlightened James, causing his demeanor to perk up. The girl, she managed to tell us something before the ambulance arrived, I added. Oh my God. Well, what did she say? James asked with excitement. Well, it's not what she said. Her skull was fractured, her tongue had been removed, and her brain had a lot of swelling. Actually, she wrote something in her own blood in the dirt just before the ambulance arrived. What did she write? Rodriguez asked. I took a moment before I was ready to answer. I wasn't sure what to make of it myself, if I was honest. Pig, I answered eventually. Pig? P-I-G? Pig? Rodriguez asked, constantly checking he'd heard correct. I could tell he thought the same as me. Well, you don't think... Wouldn't be the first time that a serial killer in Kansas turned out to be wearing a badge. Who told you this? Young'un, Stevenson. He was really pale and withdrawn when I asked him about the girl. I honestly thought it was due to seeing the horrible sight, but no, he told me in the canteen that the girl was reported anonymously. He gets the call from dispatch and turns up to find this girl on the side of the road. Oh, total mess. Mangled, twitching, and gargling blood. He assumes she's trying to ask for help. He assures her the ambulance is coming and everything's going to be okay, you know. Cop shit. This girl, with her last ounce of strength, takes a stub from where one of her fingers was amputated and writes in the dirt. He said she lost consciousness almost just after she finished the G. Jeez. James didn't have any other words. I mean, maybe we're jumping to conclusions here, I speculated. Maybe. Let's just not rule anything out. Who else knows? He asked. Just you, me, and Stevenson. He said he didn't know what to do. He only told me because he knows I'm not even in law enforcement. He said he took a picture on his phone and covered the blood with more dirt, I said, bringing him up to speed. Good, well, at least we can say Stevenson isn't a suspect. Makes no sense he'd tell us that if it were him. But I don't know. This, along with the fact one of the victims was a cop's daughter. I really don't know, Ruth. This is disturbing. I'm not gonna lie, James said, running a hand through his hair, as if trying to come to terms with the gravity of this new incident. Get Stevenson to send you a copy of the photo. I want to see it, he requested. I gave him a nod, confirming his request. I think it's best we both get some rest. We both start tomorrow with a clear head and a rested mind. We take into account what we know now, and look at this again. Sound good? And by both of us, I meant mainly him, and by clear head, I meant not boozed up. He got that, though, I could tell. I'll be around at 8 a.m. We'll make a start on everything. I laid out the plan while James nodded away. I got up, grabbed my bag, and made a move for the door. Oh, here, let me get that for you, James insisted, rushing to take the chain off the latch. I turned to him with my palm out. The bottle, I demanded. He conceded and pulled a 1-liter bottle of scotch from his suitcase and placed it in my hand. And the other one, I demanded, harder. He bit his lip, skulked back to the suitcase, and pulled out a half-empty bottle of bourbon. He walked over and handed it to me. I placed both bottles in my handbag. Then I turned back to him. And the rest, James. Final straw now, and this time James began to really sulk. "I've given you everything, that's it," he said, a frustrated anger in his voice. "Fine. I'll go book my flight back to Denver. Should be able to get a red-eye," I said, walking away from him. "Wait," he snapped. He rolled his eyes, dropped his gaze to the floor, and shook his head in defeat. A few short seconds passed before he sighed heavily and stormed over to his bedside table. He pulled the drawer open and grabbed 4 small bottles of assorted spirits. He placed them in my hand like a spoilt child who'd had their Game Boy confiscated. "Very good. Got there in the end, didn't we?" I teased. "Aren't you going to accuse me of holding out again?" He stropped. "No, I know there's no more," I said confidently. "Wait, what? How?" "The first 2 times you gave him up way too easy. I told you, James, I've worked with addicts long enough to know the reaction of someone who's just handed over their last drop," I informed him, with a gloating grin on my face. He shook his head and frowned at my cockiness, but he couldn't help but hold back a grin either. "Good night, Ruth. See you in the morning." "Good night," I replied, as I started to walk to my room. Just before I heard his door close, I turned and yelled back to him to get his attention. "James!" He stopped and reopened the door, raising his eyebrows to show me he'd heard. "I'm proud of you." Chapter 9. There's an awfully long gap between knocking on Agent Rodriguez's door and him actually answering it. But when he did, I saw why. "Morning," James murmured with a weak voice. He was pale, shaking, and the sweat was beating down his forehead. "Jesus, James," I exclaimed as he essentially collapsed onto me. "Oh, God, come on, let's get you inside." I dragged James's half-dead form across the room and threw him onto the bed. I'm so sorry that you had to see this." James could barely apologize due to the tremors. I quickly began pulling the bourbon out of my bag and placing an empty glass on the table. "Don't apologize. There's a liquor store right down the street. You could have gone, but you didn't. This right here shows me that. Now, let's get you even," I said, as I began to pour around 35 centiliters of neat alcohol into one of the motel's generic glasses. "Here, come on, drink up. 1 now, then half this measurement in the evening. No more, no less. We'll try to reduce each drink by 5 centiliters per day. You could be detoxed within the week. Look, I won't sugarcoat it. It's going to take some will, James, but I know you can do it." I passed him the glass, which he grabbed with 2 hands and began to pour the medicine down his neck like it was the cure for cancer. "Good, okay. Well, I'm going to head out and get us some breakfast. Just let that take its effect and we'll go to work." I waited for his response, but I didn't get one. He just continued to lay in a ball on the bed, desperately trying to stop the shakes. I left him to heal and exited the room. I made my way back to the room, with 4 croissants, 2 flat whites, and 1 criminal psychologist raring to go. I put the key in and unlocked the door. As I entered, I kicked off my heels and let my bag slip from my shoulder onto the table, along with breakfast. I looked up and was gobsmacked. Pictures, profiles, maps, locations, post-its, crime scene and pathologist reports, all plastered on the main wall of the motel room. Every victim, where they were last seen, where the bodies were found, how they died, any leads, any witnesses. I was astounded. The bathroom door swung open and there he stood, not vulnerable and withdrawing James, but Special Agent Rodriguez. He was even, he wasn't slurring, he wasn't shouting. He was back and he was ready to fight his demons. "Wow, I'm honestly impressed. I've only been gone an hour." "Well, I thought it was the least I could do, given what you've done for me," he explained. "I'm just helping out a friend," I informed him. I could hint a bit of awkwardness after I said the F word. "So then, what do we have so far?" I asked, quickly changing the subject. I approached the board, examining all the information that Rodriguez had put together. The picture that Officer Stevenson forwarded of the word pig was pinned next to the information on Bethany Matthews. It wasn't lost on me either that newspaper clippings of the Showtime killers, aka Frank Adams, a freelance crime scene photographer, and Jim Mellor, a Wichita PD cop, were both pinned next to Juliet Knight's profile. There was also a huge piece of green tape joining the two cases. It was clear that Rodriguez was looking at the police very closely. We spent the next few hours going through every case individually, piecing all the details and evidence together with a fresh set of thinking. Rodriguez might as well have had a drip of coffee inserted into his vein, given the amount he was going through. I imagine he was starting to dry up and once again feel the withdrawal symptoms. Fair play to him, though. He just got on with it. So, our unsub stalks the highways. You might even say patrols, I ventured. Like a cop, James stated. All the victims were drivers and their cars were all found abandoned. Why else would they get out of their cars? Were they forced? I speculated. Maybe they were pulled over, James added. Shit, I sighed. This was getting hard to rule out law enforcement. I know. Only thing that puzzles me, though, is, well, if it was a police officer, a job where you're strongly trained in first aid, CPR, stuff like that, why leave the victim alive? Surely you'd know they could ID you. Huge risk, he wondered. Well, regardless if this is a police officer or not, ultimately he's a serial killer first, and my analysis remains the same. He's addicted to murdering these girls. First he buried them, then he dumped their corpses, and now he needs a new rush. Maybe this was him getting a bigger rush. Leaving Bethany Matthews with a hint of life in her injected a new element of risk, I explained. And if I was honest, I wasn't totally convinced we were dealing with a cop at this moment. I couldn't rule it out, though. But for now, I'd be team regular serial killer, whereas James had clearly made his mind up. I guess, he muttered. Okay, let's say it is a cop. Are you saying it's a lone wolf or a bad apple like Frank Adams or Jim Mellor, using their status to aid their crimes? Or are you thinking something more sinister? I probed. James took a pause and ran his hand through his hair, which was now becoming a common sign for him being overwhelmed with his inner demons. He walked over to the armchair in the corner of the room and flopped into its embrace. He grabbed his coffee cup and prayed there was something left. I don't know, I honestly don't. But I just know one thing for certain. Each day thousands of people put on a badge and swear to protect and serve the public. And there's an alarming number of them who intend to do the exact opposite. They protect and serve the highest bidder, he admitted shamefully. And you think that's what's going on here? A conspiracy? James took a minute to get his proverbial ducks in a row. When I worked under Agent Johnson, we got given these cold cases, some runaway types. One was recently released from juvie, a semi-homeless girl and also a sex worker. Types of girls who no one would miss, and no one did either. As he started with the beginnings of what would no doubt be a riveting trip down memory lane, I decided to make myself comfy opposite him on the corner of the bed. I also grabbed what was left of my coffee. I allowed him to continue. Now, you see, Bill was very opinionated. I liked that about him, though, to be honest. Not everyone else did. Anyway, office politics and the fact Bill refused to be any part of a clique ended up with him being given the shit. Dead-end jobs. And then, by association, me too. I shook my head to show my contempt for such behavior, but also not interrupting him. So, we're on these cases. 3 missing persons initially, but their bodies were found, eventually. Every one of them had been raped, butchered, and dumped. They'd all been branded, too. This weird symbol, scorched right into their skin, just above the ass. No one gave a shit at first, but then this girl gets snatched right from outside her frickin' house in broad daylight. People think it's some sort of ransom deal, because this kid is the daughter of some big hedge fund owner. Then this little girl's body turns up too in the Chattahoochee. Same condition, the same mark. Well, you can imagine people really started to give a shit now. Suddenly this case that was a punishment has just become the biggest case in the last 5 years at the Bureau. We were getting strong pressure from the DD to find some sex pervert to pin it on and make us look good, but Bill, he wasn't convinced it was a killer. He thought it was something more, something sinister, and, well, he was right. By now I was hanging off his every word. That symbol was a butterfly, Rodriguez said with intensity. The swarm, I exclaimed. Yep, from that investigation you have no idea the shit we uncovered. Oh shit, I'm not even supposed to tell you, but I will because I need to tell someone. I only ever told one other person, and he's dead now. Jeez, James. What? I asked, my adrenaline through the roof. Well, it was no secret that the 10 high-ranking members of the Swarm's command network were made up of powerful people. Senators, terrorists, CEOs, political figures, gang leaders, and satanic cult leaders. But what was withheld from the public were 2 things. 1, over 150 police officers across 5 states, from uniformed rookies all the way to a few police chiefs, all in bed with these guys, helping cover up murders, track down witnesses, and silence anyone who threatened to expose their bosses. Good God. I could barely believe my ears. What's the second? There weren't 10 shot callers. There were 11. The 11th figure was codenamed the Queen. I highly believe that she was the founding member, the one pulling the strings. She could have anyone in any organization, criminal or non-criminal, on this earth, snuffed out and never to be seen again, with nothing but a thumbs down. Oh, we were desperate to find her. If we could uncover the Queen, then the rest of the swarm would fall. And did you find her? I asked, eager to know. Him. We found him, yes. Took an undercover operation which took around 3 years and ultimately cost the life of the UCA, but yep, we did it. It was Henry Gibson. His words blew me apart. No fucking way. The director of the FBI was the leader of the swarm? Ex-director of the FBI, but yeah, unbelievable, isn't it? The president and the attorney general both ruled that to protect public faith and also to protect a potential asset. So, Henry Gibson gave up the rest of the command network, and in return we faked his death for him. Even his family have no idea what he did. To them and the rest of the world, he died in a plane crash somewhere over Cuba. Or actually, he's in a secret facility off the coast of Costa Rica. It's a government supermax facility, a black site, so officially it doesn't exist. And he's definitely there under a new name. Gets to go out once a week to fish and swim. Lives better than most people in there anyway. He's set to be released in 2029 under a new alias and will be set up somewhere far from the USA. Couldn't barely wrap my head around the huge piece of knowledge I'd just received. This was honestly like finding out what happened to the Dyatlov Pass, or if Area 51 is a fucking real alien base. Well, I just muttered a few words that evidenced my shock, such as shit and holy fuck. So you see, it might seem likely to you that cops did these girls, but I've learned to keep a very open mind. I bet, I answered facetiously, not really knowing what else to say. Oh, and Ruth. I know it goes without saying, but I'll take that to my grave, James, I assured him. I hope you do, because I think anyone who threatens to reveal that secret will be expendable, he warned me. My facial expression assured him I knew the risks. He seemed satisfied that he could trust me. Okay. Agent Rodriguez broke the silence. What's our next move? So, getting good, isn't it? That is approximately the halfway point in this story. So I'm aiming to get this finished over the course of the next 2 Friday evenings. And I really, really hope you're going to join me for this one, because it's great, isn't it? Well, I think so. I hope you agree with me. Let me know what you think. Thoughts, feelings, anything else you want to say in the comment section below the video. And as ever, I will do my best to reply to as much of it as I can. Well, I'm really into this. I think it's great. This whole universe is so rich, so full of life and death, really, isn't it? And it's just keeping me intrigued, and I hope it's having the same effect on you. So, Join me again next Friday night. You're gonna, aren't you? Of course you are. Till then, my dear friends, sweet dreams and bye-bye. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. It really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams, and bye-bye.